Okay. Great. I'm going to record this. Hope I haven't heard that is not okay from anyone, but feel free to also take screenshots of slides. I will send the slides out additionally. Here are just some contacts on this front slide, and I'm going to get right into Berkeley Neuroscience. Okay, so I'm going to walk through first the steps of applying to Helen Wells Neuroscience Institute, or HWNI, or HWINI, which I heard somebody refer to it as once. And the components, and we can talk a little bit about those. There's going to be some more questions later on, kind of detailing some components of the application, and hopefully we'll have time afterwards to get more into like the nitty-gritty of these components. But the big one that people know of is the statement of purpose. So this is 2 to 3 pages, double spaced. And this is really where you have the opportunity to describe your research interests and why you think Berkeley Neuroscience is a good fit for you. And so the biggest like tip that I have off the top of my head is to try to make your career goals as like elevator pitchy and defined as possible. So I think it tends to be pretty helpful to be like, okay, look, I am, in systems neuroscience, and my interest has lied in, vaguely the realm of memory for, this many years because of this background that I have, or this class that I took. I find that professors seem to like this narrative of showing like that you have an idea of what you want, rather than just being like, I really like the brain, and so I want to study it. I found that to be a helpful tip. This is different from the personal history statement, which is 1 to 3 pages double spaced. In the personal history statement, you really have an opportunity to give more of like who you are and more of your personal background, and why you got into neuroscience in the first place. So you can use this opportunity to talk about, maybe a family story that got you into neuroscience, or your own experiences. Maybe here's a good place to kind of touch on your work in diversity and your maybe social relationships regarding the field of neuroscience, and how you see like neuroscience connecting to like this larger picture of who you are as a human, whereas the statement of purpose is meant to be a bit more like research focused. So you are also going to need 3 recommendation letters. I would recommend asking professors to write those letters for you as early as possible, and then checking in with them, because professors are often really busy. The GRE, this is not required anymore. It used to be required a couple of years ago, and pretty recently we do not require the GRE, which is, I think, a super nice change. The GRE can be pretty biased. Some people are not test takers, so you can include it if you are a really good test taker and you want to take the GRE, but it's not required anymore. You will need transcripts from all of your undergraduate institutions. In the beginning, you just need unofficial transcripts. I know some schools require paying for transcripts, so unofficial transcripts suffice for the application itself. But you will eventually need real transcripts when, I think, after you get through like most of the admissions process. You can find more information on these links for a little bit more details. Again, you can screenshot this slide, or I will send the slides out afterwards. Unfortunately, the application fee is pretty steep to my eyes, $135. It can be waived if needed. I'm not really sure what the if needed part means, but I think you can. There's a box that you can click on the application itself to waive this fee. I'm not really sure what it entails to waive. I'm not sure if anyone on the panel has experience waiving the fee. Do either of you want to speak to that?
Yeah, go ahead, Mars.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I had my fee waived by being a participant in like minority diversity initiatives through my undergraduate campus. So that's an option. I think once you choose to waive it, it'll ask for basically like some sort of proof. I think you just need like a written letter from someone that's like part of the department. I was part of like LSAMP, which is like Louis Stokes Alliance for Minority Program. So they just write a letter, they send it to Berkeley, and then you'll get the fee waived. That was my process.
Yeah, I think if you go on the application, there's many avenues to go down to get the application fee waived, probably like 20 to 30, mostly if you participated in any sort of outreach or diversity initiatives. But I think another one that I didn't know about before applying was if you lived in a medically underserved area. So you can kind of click the link that they have right in the application and put in like your zip code. And it says if you were medically underserved in the area that you grew up, they just automatically waive it for you.
Thanks. There is a little caveat of the application fee is a bit more expensive for international students, and I was told that it can't be waived for international students. I'm not as familiar with the international application process. I'm not sure if anyone on this panel is. I know we have some international students in the program, though. If people have international specific questions, I can definitely try to connect you with a mentor in our program. I know I've had at least a little bit of interest already. But that's the basics of applying to Helen Wills. I'm going to walk through how the application is assessed. There will be a lot of text on this slide. It's also not entirely, it's still something of a like obscure process to me. I haven't been directly involved, but I'll try to give as much clarity as possible. So first you submit your application, and usually we have about 400 to 450 applications. So not a ton, but still a pretty good number. The applications are then evaluated using a rubric by each subfield. So when you apply, you will have the opportunity to select which subfield of neuroscience you're in. So that's cell or molecular, circuits or systems, cognitive or computational. And then usually 2 faculty members in each subfield will review all of the applications that are checkboxed into that subfield. From there, the top 16 applications from each subfield advance based on this rubric score. And the rubric score is still like hidden. The rubric itself is still like hidden from me. I was asking about it, and it's just like, I was just told that like the applications are evaluated holistically. So I'm still not really sure what that means. We can talk about that more in the Q&A part. But the top 16 applications advance. The scores are normalized to the mean of each review group. And then from there, there is, oh, sorry, I forgot to say in that last step, the faculty members basically like swap applications and rescore. So cell, molecular, and system swap, and then cognitive and computational swap, since those 2 subfields are usually kind of more related. And so then you have like this larger score, then the scores are normalized. And then from there, so that's 48-ish applications. There's a whole committee meeting, which is 7 faculty and 1 student member. Each committee member will give each applicant a score, and then all of those scores are averaged. And there's this whole discussion, and I think it's not entirely based on score. There's like some discussions and, advocating for certain applications that goes on in this committee meeting. The top about 48 applicants are invited to interview. I believe, again, this year they will be online interviews. So usually this breaks down to about like 13 of cell molecular, circuit systems, and cognitive, and then about 9 computational focused students. In February are the interviews. And then after each round of interviews, there's 2 separate weekends of interviews usually. And after each weekend, the committee will go over this faculty and student feedback from each of those interviews and offer admission to some students. I think there's also some students after the first interview that are like in a kind of like waiting pool that won't hear until after the second interview. So if you don't hear immediately back after the first interview, you still have an opportunity to be admitted after the second interview weekend. And then admission is extended to about 36 applicants. So that breaks down to about like 10 each of cell molecular, circuit systems, and cognitive, and about 6 from computational. So if you do the math of adding up like of 36 over like 450, that's like a admissions rate of about, I think like 8 or 9%, maybe 7%. I don't remember. But it's definitely competitive. And you can see that the first big cut is really like this after this first round of interviews. So we're gonna hopefully in the Q&A can get through some questions about like what makes an application more successful, and how you can get here. The application is due November 30th at 8:59 Pacific time. So that is basically midnight Eastern time. I can't do the calculations in my head of all of the other locations in the world. But my big recommendation here is like really like try to tell your brain that it's due a day earlier, so that you have all of the material just in case there's some kind of, Wi-Fi issue, or like you discover last minute that you're missing a component. Really recommend trying to get this done like as early as possible. And this, I think, also includes the faculty recommendation letters. So definitely remind your faculty to get those in on time. It's also worth noting that Helen Wills can bump your application to other departments after the initial review. So if Helen Wills reads your application and decides that you might be a better fit for like molecular and cell biology, our MCB program, or the psychology program, you can be deferred to those programs and then go through a separate application review process in those departments. Okay, was there anything? Oh yes, if you want application help, if you feel like you just need like another pair of eyes, we really want to make this accessible. We know that not everybody has a mentor that they can easily talk to, or, family members who are familiar with this process. So if you feel pretty stuck, just feel free to reach out. You have my email. There's also more contact information on the first page, and I'll send out more additional follow-up information after the session. But we can try to pair you with a student mentor for either a video chat, like an hour or so. We can try to read over an essay for you, or just if you have like quick questions that you just want to shoot an email off, we are happy to answer those questions. So we do want to elevate this opportunity for students who don't really have other people in their lives that they can turn to for this kind of help. So if you're at all like underrepresented in science, or just don't have great access to mentors for whatever reason, feel free to reach out to us. Now to jump more into what the program itself looks like and requirements of the program. I think there might be a lot of text on this slide as well. Oh, these were meant to come in one by one, but I guess I'll just go over them all at the same time. So here's a list of some of our requirements and some of the main like milestones in our program. So during your first year, you will do at least 3 rotations. They're about 10 weeks each. You can definitely do more than 3 weeks. More than 3 rotations. I did 4 rotations. I know there have been people who have done 5 rotations. So depending on, finding the best fit for you in a lab, you can do more than 3, but most people tend to do 3 rotations. As for courses, there's really very few requirements for courses that you have to take. So there's just 1 course each in molecular cellular neuroscience, either systems or computational. You can take both if you would like. 1 class in cognitive neuroscience, 1 statistics class. There's like a special neuro-focused statistics class that's offered, and then 1 elective. And there's a list of qualifying electives that's sent around each semester. I also since you're at UC Berkeley, I definitely recommend taking additional classes while you can. You can take a lot of them like pass-fail, and it's just a great opportunity to take something that you otherwise maybe wouldn't take. Like last spring, I took Mongolian Buddhism, which I really enjoyed. As for the teaching requirement, we can also get more into this in the Q&A or offline, but there is a teaching requirement for 2 courses, usually during the fall of your second year and the spring of your third year. You can teach more also if you would like to. There's a teaching certificate that UC Berkeley offers. And there's lots of opportunities to volunteer in local high schools and middle schools and elementary schools to teach more if that's something that you're interested in. The qualifying exam is probably our biggest science event for the program. It's the spring of your second year. It can be pretty stressful, but it has a very high pass rate. To my knowledge, I don't think anyone has completely failed the qualifying exam. The professors are on your side and they do want you to pass, but it will probably be mostly like internal pressure that you're putting on yourself to study for your qualifying exam. And we actually don't have a thesis defense at UC Berkeley. So the qualifying exam becomes kind of like this big, like your moment to like, become a PhD candidate. And after you pass that, you're really just working on your dissertation research until graduation. And for graduation, you give like an exit seminar and you write a thesis, but there's no like formal defense where, there's intense professors like debating you or anything like that. As for benefits, your funding is guaranteed, including your stipend for all of the years that you're in the program, provided that you're in good academic standing. Right now, the stipend is at $41,000. This is adjusted each year due to inflation and is meant to reflect the cost of living in Berkeley. I know there's still there's a student union that I will probably mention briefly in another slide. There's a lot of details about being a student at UC Berkeley that we could go on about, but for the sake of time, I'll try to keep it short. We are trying to negotiate for a higher stipend. Unsure of where that will go. In my experience, and we can talk about this more if you have questions, it's like fine. It's like a fine stipend. Obviously, it would always be nicer to feel a little bit more secure in it. In addition, the benefits include health insurance, which is dental and vision insurance. Berkeley has a really good optometry school for vision health, and also mental health is covered. And all tuition and fees are paid by the program in your lab and any other fellowship that you might get. And this holds for international students as well. Okay, some quick program stats. The average time to graduate, this is post-pandemic, or I guess we're still in the pandemic technically, but this has been adjusted for pandemic time. So it's a little over 6 years. I find this to hold pretty true. There are some people who manage to finish in a short time, but I do find 6 years to be pretty common. We have about 75 mentor labs, about 70 students currently, and each cohort is usually between like 10 to 16. I know the program director has been talking about wanting to increase the cohort size. I'm not sure if or when that will happen, but right now it's kind of a cozy small program, and I kind of like it that way because I feel like it gives us like a larger sense of community. Although obviously we have been in a pandemic for a little while now. So we're still working on coming back from that. Here are some program demographics that I asked our program manager for. And these were the only demographics that she was able to share with me. So I want to put a huge caveat of obviously gender and race by no means encapsulate the full extent of the identities in our student body. I'm also kind of disappointed that like the student race like poll or whatever it was exactly here doesn't include many different identities such as mixed racial identity, and also like race is like not really a hard and fast like identity by any means. But I did want to make these demographics accessible just in case anyone wanted to know what the student body looks like in these terms. Of course, there's plenty of other identities. And I'm not sure also exactly where this information comes from. So take all of this with a grain of salt, but it is here for you to look at if it makes you, gives you any kind of picture of what our student body looks like. Okay, some bonus content about the program that I will try to keep kind of quick. So I'm keeping an eye on the time, but I did want to share some of this additional information about the program with you all. There's a first year boot camp, which is 2 weeks before the program officially starts. And during this like boot camp, you will go over some basic techniques in neuroscience. So this is meant to make sure people have a pretty similar background. So we definitely have had students come from like physics or computer science or like philosophy and maybe don't have a really extensive background in neuroscience. And this is meant to fill in some of those gaps. It tends to be like a pretty fun kind of bonding experience for the first year cohort. There's also a first-year mentorship program where first-year students are paired with more senior students in the program, and you get money to go have lunch or breakfast, I think up to once a week. Usually it's more common that it's like every other week or once a month or so. But it's a really nice way to get to know other students in the program and facilitate your transition to Berkeley, and also get like a free meal. There's also funding for conferences. It's not a ton of funding, but it's meant to help specifically first and second years who might not be fully situated in a lab yet get to a conference and experience that side of neuroscience. There's also first and second year academic advising within the program available, where you can be paired with a faculty member in your subfield of neuroscience and chat with them if you'd like about planning classes or career moves. I think from students that I've talked to, most people tend to find the mentors within the labs that they rotate rather than like going out to seek additional academic advising, but this option is definitely still available if you would like it. There's also additional free food in our program called Neuro Friends, where for the first, I think it's the first 2 years, and now it's been kind of on and off. You're paired with your program, and you will get additional funding to go out and have a meal once a month with your cohort. So more free food. And there's also additional like program funded socials. So there's like sometimes like ice cream socials, or sometimes like pizza and like drinks socials. And there's like often talks and stuff with food. So there's some opportunities for that. Obviously there was a break during the pandemic, but we are back to doing this. I am excited for the free food. We also have a whole like neuro community retreat once a year. It has been in different locations while I've been here. So we're in Berkeley. It's been in Richmond, which is a town just like slightly north of Berkeley. It's been in Tahoe, which is to the west. It's been in Monterey, which is just to the south. And it's also been on Zoom because we were in a pandemic. But usually they try to pick a kind of fun location, and it's just like a weekend to mingle with people in the program, including, you know, other students, postdocs, faculty, postbacks, and socialize, and also hear about what's going on in the community. I'm not sure if this bullet point is going to happen again this year, but in the past there have been affinity groups centered around certain identities through a collaboration with MCB and biophysics. And I found that really nice. It was just opportunities to meet with other people who held a similar identity in some regard as you and chat. I, again, am not totally sure if this will happen again in the future, but it was really nice and I would like it for it to happen. So I'm gonna like sprinkle that in here just in case. There's also a lot of opportunities for outreach and mentorship through UC Berkeley. I know someone submitted a question related to this, and we definitely don't have time to go over in detail all of those different opportunities, but know that they are there, and I can connect you with people if you have more specific questions, and I'm happy to talk about it offline. This panel is brought to you by our Student Advocacy Committee, which is something that was founded in the wake of the George Floyd murder in May 2020, and we've been trying to just make a lasting commitment to having students advocate for student needs and the socio-political relevance of neuroscience overall, and trying to make neuroscience and academia more accessible to a wider array of people from different backgrounds. So we are in business. Last year we wrote a proposal to fund 3 different co-lead positions, and so that is open to you if you have an interest in trying to make some programming happen, and some hopefully like, you know, change and greater sense of community and accessibility in neuroscience. Really excited about this committee developing and growing over the years. There's also both graduate student instructor and graduate student union, graduate student researcher unions that are both very active. Like I mentioned in the beginning, the Graduate Student Researcher Union is planning to go on strike soon for increased benefits. There's a lot more details around that But yeah, very active unions, which is awesome. We also have a graduate assembly that meets once a month and develops an advocacy agenda to advocate with the administration for grad student needs and rights. Okay, that was a lot of information. I'm sorry, it was really fast. It's all recorded. So I will send this out later, but I wanted to move on to the submitted questions from students and applicants. And we're going to go around and open up this up to the panel. And I selected just a few questions that seem to appear more than once. And hopefully this will provide some clarity, and feel free to jump in if you have additional questions. And then probably in the last 10 minutes, I will try to create the breakout rooms. And there will be more questions available in those breakout rooms. And then I think you will officially end at 11, but if people are able to stay on, the breakout rooms will probably remain open for a little bit longer. But anyway, let's move right into the submitted question portion. And I'm going to open this up to the panelists, whoever is able to jump in on a question. But one question that we got that was really common, it makes sense that it would be a question, is how do I build a successful application, and what is valued by the selection committee? So does any of our panelists want to speak to that?
I can go ahead and start.
Yeah.
Especially since I'm a first year and we sort of went through this process pretty recently. I think, at least for my, situation, I think building a successful application is mostly knowing what kind of story you want to tell for the selection committee. And so that's sort of how I did mine. So I think, one, it's obviously starting early, like Madeline had said previously, with your recommendation letters and all of sort of the admin stuff that you need to get done. But I think most importantly, this, I don't know the selection committee, but I would assume making sure that you can translate what your research interests are, what your professional goals are to the, the admissions committee would probably be the best bet. So for me, I sort of, before I wrote my statement of purpose and my personal history statement, I sort of made key points that I wanted to address. And I went through and made sure that, my short answers or my essays were answering those kind of questions. And I also think being succinct and to the point is helpful, because, they have 500 plus applications. Make it easier on them to read, go through and be okay, so-and-so did X, Y, and Z, and that's why they think they're a good fit for Berkeley. That's great. So yeah, I think that would be my recommendations. Be succinct, sort of know the story that you want to tell. And yeah.
So I'll add a little bit to this, which is get a lot of edits, a lot of feedback from your PIs, from your mentors, from your letter writers. If anything, just so that whoever's writing your letter, they'll know you better by reading your own stuff as well. But it'll also help them see the story that you're trying to put forth. And the other thing is, it seems kind of disingenuous, but make sure you promote yourself. Support yourself, make sure everything that you've done is actually out there in the application.
Yeah, don't be afraid to toot your own horn. It's a tricky skill to develop, but one that seems to be beneficial after all. Awesome. Thank you both. I'm going to move on to the next question to make sure that we can get through all of them. How do I write a good statement of purpose? And I touched on this a little bit already, but what is the difference between that and the personal history statement? I guess we can also talk about what makes a good personal history statement if anyone is feeling that, but do any of the panelists want to chime in? I was going to have a list, sorry, of people that I was going to be you should answer this question, but now I only have one screen. So
that's all right. I can start this one. I think for the statement of purpose, so this is the statement where you're essentially showing them the experiences you've had in research or in neuroscience or in like in your academics, and how you and like what you plan to do in graduate school or what you're interested in researching. And I think for this statement in particular, it's important to show the committee like that you're prepared for graduate school. And that could be from research experience or teaching experience or just your general interest in science. If you have like a, you know, like a story about how you became interested in neuroscience, because maybe you haven't done neuroscience research before, but you have had other experiences that put you in a good position to like think critically about science, learn quickly, or like you have like a passion to learn, and kind of how you can benefit the program with your skill sets. But then I also think incorporating how the program will benefit you as a scientist is important to highlight. So if you're really interested in staying in academia and becoming a professor, or not necessarily having your own lab, but mentoring and teaching, like how will Berkeley Neuroscience help you reach those goals and why it's a good fit for you in particular. I think, highlighting not only why you're ready for grad school, but like what the program can really gain from you being a part of it. And then for the personal history statement, I think this kind of like has not as much to do with like your research experience or, these things that are going to be listed on your CV. It's more of your personal journey to coming to the decision that neuroscience graduate school is the next thing that you want to do. And if there's any sort of obstacle that you've overcome, or anything like that, that's really shaped who you are as a person and could complement who you are as a scientist, would be really good to include here. I think they're really trying to just get a sense of like who you are and what your journey has been like with or without science. And I think for example, I think this was actually one of the questions that was submitted, but like if I had a low GPA for like what was like considered the bar for applying to graduate school, and in this statement is where I addressed that was like a setback, or maybe I did it in my statement of purpose, I don't necessarily remember, but like those are things you should definitely address if you want to, if there's like a reason. Like I was working 2 jobs, so I wasn't able to like focus on school, but then I like turned that negative into a positive, saying, well, then I, stopped working and really tried to focus and take more classes and blah, blah, blah. So like try, if that's like a circumstance or something similar that you experienced, like you should definitely include them so that the committee, has an idea of, oh, like this person experienced this thing, but you can always turn these like, setbacks into like a positive. So I definitely suggest doing that as well in these statements.
Awesome, thank you. Does anyone else want to chime in, maybe like a first year or second year, just because that's more fresh in your mind?
Sorry, I just have a really quick thing. I think Karina covered almost everything, but I found I came across this tweet that I think has really good advice, and sort of like sets up your statement of purpose in the way that I was advised to by my PI when I was applying. So I'm just going to stick that in the chat and you all can
Awesome, go for it.
Yeah, I guess just to add on to what the other panelists have said, I really think that the statement of purpose is a really great way to kind of showcase more so like what you've done, what you like intend to do, how you intend to like use your experience and background to then, apply that to Berkeley and the broader missions in your life and goals. The personal history statement for me was a really great opportunity to make it more as an I guess a way for people to kind of like gauge my character better and more of like my motivations as to why I want to like pursue these things. And I also really use it as an opportunity to talk about my adversity and how going through all the grit and everything and like basically like built the character that was then needed to actually like move forward with like my life in the direction that I wanted to take it. So I think it's a really great opportunity to, you know, this is probably a cliche, but milk out the whole diversity statement, being like, you know, these things like got in my way, impacted me in one way or another, but I really like tried to persevere through them. And now, like, you know, I'm grateful in a way that like I was exposed to these things because they help then sculpt the motivation that I now have to move forward with the process. And I think it's a really great way to make it less rigid, as in like science, everything, and more like, you know, this is kind of who I am. These are my interests. This is what I want to do and why it's important to me. But yeah, basically just covering whatever the other panelists had already mentioned.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to like advocate for that perspective. This is definitely like a good place to talk about your unique identities. And I think especially for Berkeley, just in my experience, that I was accepted at 2 schools when I was applying, and the only 2 schools I was accepted were the schools that had like pretty long personal history statements where I like had this opportunity to be like, here is who I am. And I like to think that Berkeley intentionally opens this opportunity for this personal history statement so that you can express who you are outside of just this rigid context of like science and achievement. And I think Berkeley does a pretty good job of trying to create a student body that has a you know, a rich and full background. And you can kind of see like over the past few years, we've been trying to just incorporate greater like on paper diversity. And of course that doesn't encapsulate everything, but yeah, I think this is a value of Berkeley, and I hope that it continues to shine through. I'm going to move on to the next question. So this was another really big one, and I'm sure everybody here has a lot to say about this. Well, what are important things to look for in a PhD advisor and also a program itself? When you're looking at schools, is it more important to look at the program as a whole or just the lab? How do you choose a lab? What was your rotation experience like? Anyone want to jump in to this one?
I can jump in unless someone, oh, I know I just talked for a little bit, but I can keep it quick. I think for looking for a PhD program, well, obviously I think the biggest or like the obvious one is like location. You have to live there for 6 years-ish. So you want it to be somewhere where you like to live. And so that's one. And then I think for program, I think having a supportive and like a supportive environment that's conducive to not only scientific learning, but also personal growth is so important. I was choosing between 2 schools that had completely opposite program environments. And I chose Berkeley because of this really tight-knit community that we have. And they're not just people that you're going to be seeing in your labs and your rotations in your classes, but hopefully, you know, friends that you can have, and roommates you can have, and people you can hang out with outside of science and do fun hobbies and things, so that, you know, it's just takes a lot of the pressure off hanging out with people that are going through very similar scientific journeys, but being able to decompress together, I think, is really important. And I like that our program and specifically really caters to that by giving us all these opportunities to hang out. And then for your program, I think when you're applying, like for me, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to study. I study the retina now. I didn't even know people did that before I got to Berkeley. And I think what I was looking for was, I would say just have at least like 2 labs you know you're interested in. Don't just go to a program because they have like one lab that you really want to join, because the chances of like them accepting students or them having like the lab environment you like or the mentoring environment that you like is really dicey. So I would definitely say like at least 2 or 3 labs that you know you'd for sure be interested in. But if you're more open-minded, then that's also okay too. But just for choosing a program, I think that's really important. And then for choosing a lab, it's really dependent on whether or not you prioritize the mentoring that you're looking for. I think if you have a good mentor, you can really study or tackle any question in science. But if you're really interested in a certain line of research, then that could, and like, you know, the lab culture and the rotation or, you know, the mentorship style isn't as important. That's also okay. People have done, you know, been successful in labs prioritizing either thing. But the great thing about the boot camp here when you just start is you get to hear research talks from a lot of PIs. And I think the first years could attest to this. I really enjoyed our boot camp. And that's how I heard about my PI. But you get the opportunity to talk with PIs then, and then you also get an opportunity to chat with the current graduate students during this 2-week period where you're still kind of like getting integrated into the program. So really just asking a lot of questions to the current students and to the PIs when you meet with them, talk about rotations. Like there's no question that's really off the table. Like you can really ask a PI, like, are you taking students? Do you have funding to take students? If I were to rotate with you, like what would be a potential project? And then I think that kind of helps, like this like open communication like really helps make those decisions. But that's all for me.
Yeah, I can talk to this a little bit. So I was also only choosing between 2 schools, and I think both would have been like really wonderful environments. And I remember making like a really intense Google spreadsheet, like trying to compare the two. But at the end of the day, the question I asked myself is like, PhDs are extremely difficult, and like where would I rather be location wise when everything like kind of hits the fan. And so I came to Berkeley, and I applied to graduate school because I was really interested in studying psychedelic neuroscience specifically. So that kind of catered what PIs I was interested in. And I ended up choosing to be co-advised because I really kind of wanted to create, there's always the balance between like choosing the science and then also choosing like the methodology or the environment. And so I feel like I was able to strike a really great balance by creating a co-advising situation. And I think that's something that at least I think a couple people per year seem to do. So that's also an opportunity here at Berkeley that a lot of people are able to engage in.
Awesome, thank you. Sorry, I stopped sharing kind of accidentally, but also realized maybe it would be good for people to see our faces as we're talking. I'm also I'm time management. You'd think you would develop that skill over the course of grad school, but there's a lot of questions. So I'm just gonna, I guess, keep going until 11, and then I will try to create the breakout rooms. I'm not sure how much everybody can stay on, but if we are able to, I will create those. Otherwise, I will follow up with questions, and again, feel free to reach it back out. But while we're still here, I'll keep like doing this panel style questions. We kind of already addressed this, but the next question was, how might you address drawbacks on your academic transcript, like a low GPA or like a lack of leadership experience, or maybe like a lack of a certain type of lab experience? How would you maybe communicate that? Or like Karina mentioned, putting that in your personal history statement, but maybe like a good question would be like, how do you just be like, yep, this happened? Like, how would you maybe frame it or utilize it as a strength?
Mars, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. I just like, I'm very passionate about this because this is actually a really great opportunity for me that I kind of looked into. My personal background as an undergrad was pretty difficult in terms of being first generation, having 3 jobs on the side and having a lot of like family commitments. So my time on campus was very limited. And that was actually one of the things that really made me very apprehensive to pursue graduate school, was because I lacked a lot of, I feel like, the more explicit or like objective qualifications of being like a good scientist and a grad school applicant. But it was, I think, using the personal history statement as a means to kind of not necessarily like pitch or like vouch for you, but also like make it known that like this is kind of things that like you had to balance out, but never really like gave up the vision, I guess, to achieve. For me, it was a lot of like, these are the barriers that that I was faced with, but despite this, like these are like other avenues that I took to try to supplement like, I guess, like my abilities. And so it's not like, I guess, something to feel too scared about in a way. I think it's a really great opportunity to provide insight as to how you can actually like persevere and I guess make something good out of like whatever it is you're going through. I only had like, I think 6 months of working in a lab when I applied. And I didn't really have like the strongest academic record in terms of like volunteering, being involved in clubs or anything. But yeah, like kind of like I said before, it's a way to showcase that you have what it takes, but there's a lot of like obvious limitations that a lot of students have to deal with outside of academia. And I think it's always a really great way to kind of just like refresh that thought into people's minds when it comes to grad school applications. Berkeley's really great at being holistic. So I really want to encourage people that if they did ever go through like these sort of adversities and feel a bit hesitant about applying, it's nothing that should get in the way, because it's a really good way to yeah, just kind of like talk about how you really wanted to achieve something, but real life gets in the way, and that's actually at the end of the day what makes us human, right? So I don't know if that really was a good way to frame it, but yeah, it's a good way to like supplement more of like your whole initiative to want to like break into like diversity, equity, and inclusion and make it more accessible for science, etc., things like that.
Mars, I think you essentially wrapped up what I was going to say pretty well. For me personally, I sort of was in a similar situation where I had a low sort of undergraduate GPA, didn't really know what I was doing. I applied to graduate school in like the 2020 to 2021 cycle, didn't get in, was really sad. And this past cycle when I was applying, I guess like for me, I was a little bit more hesitant to be open about like the reasons why I had a low undergraduate GPA, and like this past cycle sort of talked about it more. So for me personally, I was diagnosed with like a chronic illness, and so that had like a really big impact on my life. And I think being a little bit more open about it was honestly great for me personally, but I also think like just now being at Berkeley and like knowing the like neuro administration, like I can see how like them taking that into consideration like definitely really helped. And I also think that there's such good, strong support networks here at least. But yeah, so I mean, I like Mars had said, you know, talk about at least I think addressing potentially like a you know, a factor that may, you know, be a mark against you in a way that, you know, you're like being upfront about it, but then also sort of spinning it into like, okay, well, you know, this happened, but like, you know, I learned I had a chronic illness and I, you know, worked really hard to get a strong publication record. And, you know, now it has solidified my interest in science, sort of going, you know, thinking about things like that and sort of using it as like, okay, well, this is why I'm like still motivated to go to grad school. And like this hardship that I faced is only like making my passion for like neuroscience or whatever, like stronger. But yeah, I mean, and also like during my interview, I interviewed with Bob Knight, and he like, the one question he asked me was like, I see that you have a low undergraduate GPA. Like, why is that? And so I like panicked a little and essentially like just verbally vomited, like I had a chronic illness and like all of these things. And he was like, oh, great, chill. Okay. Just wanted to ask and see what you would say. But yeah, I think it's more of like a, you know, what kind of makes you, you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you both. We are brushing up against 11. So if people need to leave, I actually have like a phone appointment. So that's scheduled for 11. I kind of expect they'll call late, but we'll see. So I'll hang out for like until I get that call. But we still have a few more questions that I want to throw out. And then as people trickle out, we will probably shut down around like 11:10-ish. But then our next question is about preparing for virtual interviews. So that was not something that I had to do, but I know some of the more like junior students did have to do virtual interviews. So does anyone have tips on that they want to share?
Yeah, I'll go. Oh, sorry. Two of us are in the same room, so we're having some audio problems, but I think it's good now. one thing that I did, I was really nervous about doing virtual interviews. So I literally went on YouTube and Googled like virtual interview, and I had kind of an old white man on my screen and like watched the video as I like talked to him. So I could just practice like giving my research spiel over again and just like feeling really confident in the things that I've done, because you should feel confident because you were the one that did it. So just being like really confident in like being able to talk about the things that you've done. But I feel like for virtual interviews, it ended up being super chill. I think that I definitely over prepared. Kind of after the first one, I was like, oh, I'm just kind of having a conversation with these people. Nobody's trying to like quiz you or grill you. I think that most of the professors, if they had any knowledge about what I'd done, were like very genuinely interested in hearing about what I had done and kind of just asking me questions out of curiosity. So I think that, yeah, it was much more chill than I expected.
Definitely seconding that. I was a little surprised at how like conversational our like Zoom interviews were, which was really nice. I felt like I was talking to like different parts of my application for each one. But essentially what I had done when I was preparing was you get a list of your interviewers, and I just sort of like stalked their labs and like made like maybe 1 or 2 questions just in case I needed to, about like their lab, their work. And then I had like a general like list of questions about Berkeley specifically, which I thought was really helpful. I also sort of brushed up on like my own research background, and it turned up like, I think it was helpful for like maybe a couple of questions I had during my interviews, but I feel like most of it was just kind of like, who are you? Why Berkeley? I remember talking to like Fritz about his like clementine trees or something in his like backyard for like 15 minutes. Like it definitely varied a lot.
Yeah, I feel like some of the faculty, when I was interviewing in person, the faculty at Berkeley were probably like the chillest. They were just like hanging out in their like, t-shirts and like old band t-shirts and like whatever, just being like dads. But I guess I'll move on to the next question while we still have time. A really great question that I loved that we got was, if you could do it all over again, what would you do differently? I don't know if anyone wants to take that. It's a
Wait,
hard
can you
question.
repeat it? Sorry, I was typing in the chat.
If you could do it all over again, what would you do differently? It's a good philosophical question.
Like about applications or just like choosing
Yeah, I
one?
mean, I assume so.
I mean, so I was also a first gen college graduate, and so the application process was like super weird to me. Like I didn't really know what to do. I was like on Grad Cafe, like checking it every 5 seconds and like going crazy. And I didn't know that people like reached out to faculty before interviews and stuff. Kind of wish I did, just a little bit to like put my name out there, but I know that I didn't. So, and I'm here, so it's probably fine. But I think for applications, just kind of to get a better sense of like what the research was like, because I came in super open-minded and didn't really know exactly what I wanted to study. So it was kind of hard during some interviews when, they'd ask me like what I'd want to do, and I couldn't really articulate it at the best of my knowledge at the time. But I don't know if that's as relevant. But I don't know. I really like it here, so I don't really think I would do it different.
I think just for me, I'll just hop in just to say that if I was doing applications differently, I would probably actually not have applied the year that I applied. I probably would have waited another year, just for me personally, because I had not really developed that much research experience in the area that I am in now. And I think it would have just helped like my overall application and just like sense of self-confidence and like helped my imposter syndrome if I had like actually spent another year as a tech. And that's not to say like don't apply. And that's maybe more indicative of like, what other practices can we work on as a community to like help with imposter syndrome and stuff like that. But I think, I mean, maybe if I had done this again the same year, I think it probably would have been worth it for me to like chat a bit more with like the mentors that I did have accessible and really think about curating like the narrative around research that I did this kind of weird thing where I was in like 4 different labs over 4 different years because I was just like, maybe I like this, maybe I like this, maybe I like this. And it made like, I guess, a cool like background to story, but it didn't really help. I had like a very like messy personal or statement of purpose. And I think it would have helped me feel a little bit more secure in myself as a scientist if I'd spent a bit more time like focusing on the area that I ended up going into, which was the last lab that I had teched in before coming to grad school. Okay.
Sorry, I do just want to add though that like I switched fields like when I came into grad school, and there's like a couple people in my cohort and others who have done that or are doing that. And like I also sometimes think that I should have applied at a different time, but I like after knowing more about the field that I switched into, but like the rotation system and just like the way a lot of PIs like approach rotations in grad school, I think is like really nice and flexible here in the sense that like you don't have to have all of the skills that you like need to do whatever research that you want to do like before you go into grad school. And like a decent, it's like unlike like I'm in cog neuro, so I could have applied to psych where you apply to like one PI and you're expected to like have the background and the skills in that area. Like it's very different here. And so if you're like thinking of switching fields or you don't really know what you're doing, one approach would be to like do some more soul searching and get some more experience, but you also will be totally fine if you come to a place like Berkeley. It's not unusual.
Yeah. Thanks for trying to say that.
Yeah, I just kind of want to add on to that because when I also, similarly to Madeline, I worked in 3 different labs that did completely different things to what I'm currently doing. They were all in the brain and different systems. Now I'm in the retina, and I didn't know anything about vision science before this. And then I also had 0 electrophysiology experience or calcium imaging experience, and those are like, now I'm essentially just an electrophysiologist, and I learned that in the last like 2 years. So that wasn't like a barrier for like Marla to have me rotate with her. Like she was very much okay with me not knowing things because like we are here to learn stuff. And so, yeah, I wouldn't let that discourage you from like applying to a program or rotating in a lab.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks everyone. Yeah, I feel like Berkeley does a pretty good job of helping you get to where you need to be. There are different resources available, and I'm just gonna put in a personal plug for like I started therapy my first year as a grad student, and like that's been pretty helpful for the whole imposter syndrome thing, and just human development. I still haven't gotten this call yet, so I'm just gonna like kind of hang out here until I'm like done with my list of questions and or get this call. But I guess we could do kind of like a rapid fire of the panelists around here. Of one question that we got a lot of was, did you reach out to PIs before applying, and was that helpful? So I guess I'll just go like on my screen. Like Samira, you said no.
I did not.
Okay, Karina did not. Doja, yes, it looks like. Deepthi.
The schools I had, like I reached out to, I did not get into, and the 2 schools I got into were the ones I did not reach out to PIs. So I am not condoning that action, but take that as you will.
Mars did.
Yeah, I reached out, to a few.
Yeah, I did as well. I kind of reached out to like a couple at different schools, and I honestly mainly did not hear back from many of the people that I reached out to. Part of the reason that I ended up like going to Berkeley is that like Dan Feldman actually like responded and was like, yeah, like you like would love to talk to you. Do you want a phone call? And I was like, oh, cute. So he actually called me and we chatted.
Dan, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that was it.
Yeah, he's like the #1 recruiter. I met him at like, he came to a talk at my old lab, and then I had lunch with him, and he ended up giving me the phone call of my acceptance, and I still have that voicemail saved. I think it's really cute. But he's the best. Reach out to Dan. He's great.
Yeah. If you do reach out to someone, reach out to Dan Feldman. Okay. It seems like I do have to hop off, but if people are able to stay on, feel free. I will send out some follow-up information. And thank you all so much. And thank you panelists also for coming, and hope to hear from you all or see you in the future.